Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Cochran. I'm an architect working at General Electric. My main focuses are identity and access management as well as API security and management. As far as the clicker goes, let's see how this works. Is this the right? Oh, perfect. There we go. Okay, so before we get started, got to do the good old disclaimer here. So the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are my own and do not necessarily represent those views of GE. Okay. So before we get started, just a quick summary of GE as a company. So GE was founded in 1892 by Thomas Edison. We were one of the initial companies that were on the original Dow Jones Index, and we're actually the only company that remains on that list today. We're a company of about 300,000 employees, and we do business across a number of different verticals. So we have our energy businesses. We do power generation, transmission, and distribution across a number of different approaches. We've got our aviation business. We're actually the world's largest provider of jet engines. Transportation, we make some of the world's most advanced data-driven locomotives. Our healthcare business, we make imaging, diagnostics, and monitoring equipment for hospitals around the world. And then we have our capital business. We provide consumer and commercial lending, as well as financial services for customers who are buying our products. So you may have heard in the last couple of months that GE is going through a pretty massive restructuring of our capital businesses. In fact, by 2018, we want to target about 80 to 90% of our revenue coming from our industrial businesses. So this is a very big change for GE, quite a big endeavor. So one of the ways that we think that we're going to be successful with this is through what we are calling the industrial internet. So very briefly, the industrial internet is putting sensors and relying on the power of software and analytics on our heavy industrial equipment so that our customers can get better performance and better monitoring off of these giant chunks of iron, which ultimately is going to save them a ton of money. So our company is really going all in on this strategy. In order to support all of this, our CIO is really pushing us to sort of redefine and rethink the way that we handle enterprise IT. So specifically, what is she asking us to do, our CIO, Jamie Miller? Firstly, top right, close 32 data centers and migrate over 9,000 applications to one of several clouds over the next 4 years. Some big numbers there. Secondly is we really need to continue stepping up our game in the mobile space. We have about 350 mobile applications across our businesses today. This number is going to continue to increase. And also, we need to continue using software as a service where it makes sense. We also need to improve what we're doing around business to business and our consumer's identity. Today, GE basically provides identities for the majority of our partners and the majority of our customers when they do come and access our applications. So we manage somewhere around 8 million identities in that space today. So we certainly want to get out of that business and do a better job there. And then lastly, we want to focus on self-service. All of the access management platforms that we're building, we want to make it easy to use. We want to make it simple, standards-based, so that developers can do their job. Our current access management platform simply doesn't do this. It's a very legacy approach. I think many of the companies here are probably familiar with the agent-based approach that we have. So ultimately, what GE needs to do is grow our web access management capability with the new use cases. Okay, so let's dive into it. So down at the bottom, you can see we have internal applications with web access management agents talking back to what we call a legacy access management platform. This is sort of our existing platform, and as I said before, we got about 9,000 apps. This is inside of our data center, so this is all in our trusted network. Some problems here. One is this is network dependent, so anything that's outside of our network, this doesn't necessarily work right off the bat. It's stateful, and this model only works for web applications. So from a developer's perspective, application developers, what do they care about here? They really care about developing their application, When they're done with their app, they care about bolting on security at the very end, right? So this is not necessarily a great practice for our developers. We want them to be more involved in the security and the full SDLC. And then lastly, they're involved in consuming headers. They know that after they get this, magic things happen, security happens, and then they can get headers that they use for authorization or for their app. Support teams, what do we care about from the corporate side? We actually own and support the agents on all of these web servers, so we care about agent support. We also care about engaging the app teams and writing very specific policy that's very specific to each one of these apps. So what happens when these new use cases come in? Okay, so this is where our cloud access management platform comes into play. So as you can see, this new box exists down here on the bottom. What this is it's basically an abstraction layer that sits on top of our existing investments. You can see that there's three main parts to it. One is we have a federation platform, and you can think about this as the way we authenticate our users outside of our network. I'll get into protocols and what we do there in a moment, but OpenID Connect, SAML, these are OAuth, these are some of the pieces that this supports, as well as a security token service. Go back real quick. Secondly, we have what's called a trusted identity exchange. So this is, second box, this is where we provide attributes for authorization. And then lastly, we have our API gateway. So this is where external applications, if they need to, they can reach back through the API gateway to consume workloads that remain inside of our data center. So this helps us not have to poke firewall holes in all of our network. So some good things about this: network independent, stateless, works cross-platform. Right? We provide this as a platform. Applications use what we provide to solve identity-related problems in their applications. Okay, second piece here is that we also provide, we really think it's extremely important to make this very, very easy. The user experience has to be really good. We need to make sure that our developers understand what we're asking them to do and have the best guidance possible. So that's where we have two pieces: a request portal where it kicks off all of our processes, it has all the documentation, and secondly, a self-service API. So all of these elements that I described, they all have APIs for them. And what we've been able to do is we're actually able to securely expose portions of the administrative APIs for all of these platforms. An example here is for our federation platform, we expose the OAuth client creation API. So now application teams, they don't even have to engage a human to create new applications to deploy in cloud or in mobile. They can now just call an API, create a client, and get back all of the necessary information they need to deploy. And lastly, transition responsibility. So as I mentioned before, today we own the agents and we own supporting that. Now we can actually say, we will provide the centralized platform support. We'll give you guys recommended approaches. When I say you guys, I mean the developers. And then app teams ultimately own their own implementation. They own the strategy around how they actually do this, what the policy is. That's all now their responsibility. So it really starts building that, building better practices around security. Okay, so let's look at this from a slightly different angle. So what is actually happening at each one of these steps? So let's first talk about authentication. OpenID Connect. So this is really our strategic direction going forward. What happens here is a user will try to access an application up top. There won't be a session, and they'll get redirected to our federation platform where they will authenticate. Another cool part about this is that underneath where it says legacy access management, today this could be one thing, but there's nothing stopping us from upgrading or changing or enhancing the way that we do authentication over time. As long as it's behind this abstraction layer, it all makes sense. So OpenID Connect happens, the user is authenticated, we pass back some tokens. You can see on the top left the OAuth or OpenID Connect request, and then the response that the application actually gets after all is said and done, including an ID token, which is a JSON web token, an access token, and then a refresh token as well. If the application happens to need more attributes for authorization or for user experience, they can use our Trusted Identity Exchange. We either do REST, some form of REST, or we also support the SCIM standard for consuming attributes, the standard schema there. And then lastly, this is a really key point, is because the user authenticated with OpenID Connect at the beginning, if you look at the left there, they actually got back an access token. So what our applications can do if they follow this pattern is they now have everything they need to make secure API calls down to our API gateway, where the call will be authenticated and verified before being reverse proxied to the specific API that they're looking for inside of our network. So as you can see, I mean, this is really the whole pattern and kind of what our strategy is going forward around both web access management and API security and management. It all kind of gets brought together in a way that's very simple for developers to use and very neat. So developers now they can use this all self-service, standards-based, cross-platform. Support teams, we now focus on improving the platform. We focus on architecture, consulting our app teams. And we also focus on refining the solutions as new use cases come up over time. For the end user, it just works. So where are we from a number perspective? We have about 700 applications doing some version of this today with SAML. So just replace OpenID Connect for SAML and a couple other details. We launched our OpenID Connect service actually in April. And we have about 45 clients that are using this today. And then we have, behind our API gateway, we have about 200 APIs today. So let's take a quick look at a little bit more detail around our API management platform. So there's a couple pieces to this. On the left, you've got API design time. This is what's known as API management. On the left is API runtime. This is the actual security part that's happening at runtime. So our businesses, individual app teams on our businesses may need to build services and publish them either to their own business, to the entire company, or to a specific application. So the way that this is done is on the top there, the API builders will come, they'll publish services to our central API registry, which is down in the left center. We support SOAP and REST. We mainly focus on OAuth, both 2- and 3-leg use cases, but we support way more than that as well. On the SOAP side. From the consumer perspective, they can then come to the registry, they can browse and discover what services are available to them, and then we actually issue them credentials so that they can actually build this into their applications. So looking over to runtime now, what is happening kind of during the app runtime? Your apps are actually using those OAuth access tokens, making requests to the API gateway there. After the access tokens are verified, they're passed back to the individual services, and then the data is returned all the way to the app. The other key part here is that these gateways, we're positioning them strategically so that it doesn't necessarily matter where applications are consuming them and where the APIs live. The APIs can be in any of our clouds, they can be in our data center, but our gateways will handle those use cases. So we've really kind of thought through that and done our homework ahead of time, which is really important. So 200 APIs across 7 businesses, that's kind of where we stand. Okay, so let's talk about web applications. How do we do OpenID Connect on web apps? So what I wanted to do is highlight one approach that we use here. As I mentioned before, it's sort of up to the app team to decide what the best way to do this is, but this is one that we think is really neat and has been working really well for our developers. So this is an Apache plugin called ModAuth OpenIDC. It's actually written by Hans Zandbelt, who's in the room. So this is as I mentioned, an open source plugin. It's a fully implemented OpenID Connect RP. So it's language agnostic. So if you're building a web app, you can install this on your server. It will take care of all of the OpenID Connect and OAuth flow, authenticate your end users, and give your application back the attributes and the access tokens that it needs to proceed. So as you can see, just graphically, this is sort of using the same format as before, and it just goes to show that we're really trying to, regardless of what type of app, OpenID Connect for authentication, trusted ID exchange for authorization, API gateway for API reachback. A couple other notes about this. We have app teams that are deploying this via Chef today. This is kind of another way that our app teams are really pushing the envelope on automation and kind of just taking it. We showed them this and they said, well, let's automate it. So now they're able to make an API call to register their new app, pass that into a chef recipe, deploy that to a server without even really, too many people being involved. And then suddenly their app is enabled for OpenID Connect and potentially for API reachback. Another good part about this is that you can write path-specific authorization policy. So you get attributes back. You can actually say, only administrators can get to /admin, et cetera. You can actually do that in this. And then you can bind to a virtual directory if you need more attributes. Some other solutions in this space, I listed a bunch here: Modox from Glue, Apache Ultu, and Spring Security. These are Java libraries that some of our developers have used successfully. And then ForgeRock and Ping Access are some other very good solutions that we're evaluating. So let's talk about mobile. Up top, you've got two libraries that we oftentimes use. We recommend these to our developers. These implement OAuth, so they go through the whole OAuth flow. They ultimately give back the OpenID Connect token to the application. So the way that we recommend our app teams, and we kind of push our app teams to do this, is we try to get them to authenticate through the Safari browser. And this is important for us because it gives our application users sort of a single sign-on-like experience. So one way that this has been put before is sort of like NAPS Lite. It's not quite using a NAPS agent, but it's actually relying on the Safari browser to hold that session. And then when another application comes and does the same thing, that session is already there. The user doesn't have to authenticate again. So if you're looking for a way to achieve single sign-on across applications without NAPS being finished, this is our solution. The other note here is we're using custom URL schemes. This is most of our 350 apps are iOS, and this is sort of the right way to do that. You register your application's redirect URI as a custom URL scheme, which you register in Xcode, get everything back, and then you can make the API calls, as I mentioned. Some other solutions: NAPS, Auth0, and CA, API management, Layer 7. They have a solution here as well. OK, great. So that's kind of where we stand today. So what's next, and where are we going? What are some of the challenges or areas we can do better in? One is authorization. So we have pretty good capability today, especially for the more simple use cases that we're starting with this whole cloud migration. But eventually, we know that we're going to have much more complexity. So we really need to continue looking at authorization solutions. We've got our eye on XACML as a potential solution for some use cases, but we're still kind of up in the air on that and looking at evaluating solutions. Gen 2 API management. So a big piece of all of this, as I mentioned, is the whole API story. Akana Software is actually the company that we just signed with. We're going with them for our next gen, and so we're excited to get started with them soon. B2B identity. So this is an area where we have, as I mentioned, we provide identities today, but we want to do a better job at federating in. With the federation approach that I described, it's going to be fairly easy because all of our apps are already being enabled for this type of thing. So it's easy to change identity providers. And then identity assurance. So we don't have, we could do a better job at getting, at trusting credentials and trusting identities than we do today. And we're aligning with the NSTIC initiatives and some of the work done in NIST, working very closely with some vendors there that are pilot winners. All right, so that's pretty much all I wanted to share today. So thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions if there are any. Yep, go ahead.
One question on your APIs. Are these open APIs, or are they just released from developer partners? And what is you got API management developer program?
Yes.
So are these things that anything go in access, or what is your barrier to entry for people who self-register and get a whole lot of client stuff?
Yep.
Do you have any vetting process for developers, or is it pretty much anybody can come in and develop?
Yeah, so great question. So it's across the board. We have API providers who, Aviation will build a specific Aviation API and publish it only to Aviation applications. On the other hand, corporate, who I work for, we might publish sort of like a master data API or something that the entire company would need to or could have access to. On top of that, third-party APIs. We're looking into that. That's sort of I would say uncharted territory right now, or at least there's a great way to do that. So how do we protect our box API and limit access to that if we need to do that? It's something that we're looking at. So not everybody can get access to it. It really depends on the requirements of the API provider. Do you have a question?
I do. So there's this legacy web access management environment that's a part of your environment.
Yep.
My understanding is that you've been able to replace some SiteMinder agents with the Apache plugin. I think, was this the Federation-enabled application?
Yeah, so these are applications as we're moving them out of our data centers, we're taking this as an opportunity to modernize them. So no longer do they have the SiteMinder agent, but instead we are replacing it. One of the ways that we're replacing it is with the agent I described, but applications are taking multiple approaches.
Okay. So the Ensemble agent is one way you replace the SiteMinder agent, and then another way might be the Apache plugin.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a number of them on the bottom left there that we have successfully tested and we have in production. Not all of them are in production, but a number of them are. So, and that's kind of the goal. Is we don't want to be prescriptive. We've been very prescriptive with thou shalt must use this web access management agent, but that doesn't always work for every use case. So we sort of we make recommendations and then app teams choose from there. Yep. So yeah, so far, so we've got about, I said 8,000 to 9,000 total applications with SiteMinder agents. Right now, we're about a year in, maybe a little over a year in. I think we're at what, 750-ish? 750-ish. And this is split between SAML, which is where we started. If you're looking at SAML, a similar approach is using something called Shibboleth, Shibboleth SP, and this will take care of the SAML complexity for your apps. So we're about 750. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Yeah. No, you're good. Go ahead.
In your picture, so you mentioned you work with Cochran Gateway, and I don't know if it's logical or physical picture. Is it the Federation being handled by Cochran also, or is it another?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
So you mentioned you work with Cochran
Yep.
Gateway.
Yep.
You show the Federation on the other side. Is that also Cochran, or is it somebody else?
Federation is ping-fed.
Okay. You show OpenID Connect going there, which means you can access tokens. You also show access tokens. I mean, the idea of who's issuing the access tokens.
Ping Federate is, so let me go back to this one. So Ping Federate, the first thing is authentication, and this is a way that application, at the very beginning, you got to authenticate your user. When we're doing that, the application is getting back the ID token, which is the JSON web token that has attributes about the person in the authentication event, but you're also getting back the access token and the refresh token from Ping Federate in this initial step. Then later, when you want to make an API call, you can use that against the API gateway. API gateway verifies it against Ping Federate.
Okay, so we're running this exact same model right now.
Mm.
We're using a different one gateway from one company and that. And so for the developer process, you talk about the onboarding and the self-registration.
Yep.
What are you using? Is that Asana?
Yes, it will be.
So is Asana, the developer is only going to see Asana, because people that are not multi-tenant, right? So Asana is the part that's going to generate the binary secret and programmatic or something like that?
Yes, that's a very good question. So there's two ways. One is the application may want to register for OpenID Connect ahead of time, and they might not know that they want access to an API later. In that case, they can register for OpenID Connect directly against PingFed using the administration API. Later, if they want to upgrade their client to have access to additional APIs, then they can go to the cloud portal, which is the Akana platform. They can enter their client ID, and basically upgrade their existing client with additional scopes, which give them which give their access tokens access to additional APIs through the gateway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So the bottom line is though, the user and the UI is conduct is talking through the King Admin API to provision the secrets and no authentication.
Exactly, yeah. And these two stay in sync via API as well. Yep. Yep, one more.
Do you have any verticals for giving the API owner a say who can access that API?
Yep.
Because those are not necessarily bundled with the client.
Exactly, yeah. And Akana does a really nice job at that as far as when a consumer comes and subscribes to an API, we have the ability, well, the API owner sees that there's a request in their queue. They can contact the application owner. They can see what's going on. Does this person need access or not? And then they can approve or deny. So the provider can choose where to publish it. Is it public? Is it just my business, or is it to a specific team? And then they also have the governance control of saying yes or no at the end of the day. So. Okay, thank you.